Today's guest speaker is Karl Weber. He is co-author of The Triple Bottom Line: How Today's Best-Run Companies Are Achieving Economic, Social, and Environmental Success, and How You Can Too. Karl is also the president of Karl Weber Literary. He is publisher of Rivertowns Books, and he is a writer and editor of nonfiction books for over 40 years, specializing in topics that range from business to politics, current affairs, history, and more. Welcome, Karl. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Heather.
Absolutely. So tell us about your journey from working inside a publishing company as a leader to becoming a writer and author of books.
Well, Heather, I really had kind of two careers. The first half of my career, about 20 years, as you say, I spent inside publishing houses, and it was really interesting work, and I enjoyed it and was successful at it. Rose from editor to associate publisher to publisher of the business book program at John Wiley & Sons, very well-known, respected publisher, and then went on to Random House and helped them to start a business book imprint under the name of Times Books at that time. Since then, Times Books has gone through some other incarnation, so your viewers may find it under a different heading now, but that was the role that I played back at Random House a number of years ago. And as I say, very, very interesting work. Got to work with all kinds of brilliant authors who are experts in all kinds of business fields, from finance to strategy. But you know, as you rise in a publishing career, you spend less and less time working with authors and working on books, which is actually why you got into publishing, right? People who go into publishing are people who grew up as little kids falling in love with books and who wanted to work on books. So as you rise through the hierarchy, you spend more and more of your time on corporate strategy and budgeting and planning and human resources and all those sorts of things. And it actually became less and less fun. So when the opportunity arose, I said to my wife, Mary Jo, one day, you know, I think it's time for me to hang out my own shingle and leave the publishing companies and start my own operation, doing freelance work, working with authors and books again. And that's what I've spent the second half of my career, the last 20 years, doing. So it's been tremendously fulfilling and rewarding for me to get back to what I originally loved, which is working with books and authors and helping people tell their stories to the world in a compelling way. And of course, I work collaboratively with many other publishers because they're the ones who actually publish and market the books and help bring those stories to the world. But being able to work on my own and choose my own projects and devote my time primarily to the creative part of the industry has been really rewarding and enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. And there is a mindfulness angle to what you're saying. And what I like as well, and that is that you reframed your situation so that you were focusing on the passion.
Right.
You focused on, this is your life. It's your one chance here on earth.
That's
and
right.
you refocused your attention and your efforts on what you loved and your passion.
You're exactly right, Heather. And I'm sure what I'm about to say would not necessarily work out this way for everyone, but it did work out the following way for me, and I think it has for many other people, which is that when I changed my focus and went back to my passion and to what I really loved and what I really found meaningful, actually the economic rewards and the business success also followed. So that I actually became much more successful and ended up having a much more rewarding career once I got back to the basics and to what I most deeply loved. So it worked out well. It did not turn out to be a trade-off for me. Instead, I benefited in both ways, for which I consider myself very lucky.
Right. So you were, there's that saying that follow what you love and the money will follow. At the same time, you were well positioned, right? Because you were embedded in this existing system and you had the network and the contacts and so forth. So it was a strategic and a passion move for you. So that's I like to hear that. Okay. Exactly. Now, in an earlier conversation, You mentioned that when you first went back to your writing career, you were
Uh-huh.
focused on investing in business
Hmm.
strategy. And
Hmm.
then later you made a shift to focusing more on social and political impacts.
Right.
I would like for you to share a little bit about why you made that shift.
Sure. Well, again, it kind of goes back to the same theme of following your passion. I got into publishing, as I say, because I was a book lover, English major in college, did not have a business school background or anything like that. But I needed a job, and a publishing opportunity arose, editing business books. So I said, well, I can learn about business. And it did work out well because I did know how to write, how to convey ideas clearly, how to organize contents, and actually working with business authors. The fact that my own background was very slender in understanding business actually worked to my advantage, because what I would do is I would sit down across from an author who might be an expert on finance or business strategy or investing, and I would say, okay, explain your insights to me in a way that anyone could understand. Because if I can understand it, then any reader will be able to understand it. So the fact that I was, in a sense, naive and not an expert actually worked well for me when I was editing business books. But the fact remained that I was much more moved by topics like politics, social issues, ways of making the world a better place than I was by business. So at a certain point in my business career, it was while I was at Random House, actually, the opportunity came up in our office to publish a book by former President Jimmy Carter about his spiritual life, based on the Sunday school lessons that many people know he teaches in his hometown of Plains, Georgia. To this day, as of this speaking, he's in his 90s and continuing to do that, and he's much beloved. Um, I volunteered to work on that book, even though it was outside of my comfort zone. It was outside of my lane of business books. But I, at that time, was actually teaching Sunday school myself at our local church. So I went to my boss and said, "Let me work with President Carter." We formed a very good partnership. The book that we helped him create became a #1 New York Times bestseller, tremendous success for Random House. And it opened doors for me and made it possible for me to then begin selling my services to other folks in the world of politics or social issues, saying, well, I worked with former President Jimmy Carter. I can do the same thing for you and your message. So I've gone on to develop, as a freelancer, a sweet spot in my work as an editor and a writer and a publisher, which is actually working with authors who bring social concerns to their work in the business sphere. So, for example, I've collaborated on 3 books with Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for inventing microcredit in his home country of Bangladesh, which is a way of extending small loans to poor people, almost exclusively women, which enable them to work and lift themselves out of poverty. Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Prize for this, which has since gone on to help 100 million people around the world work their way out of poverty. So there's an example of someone who is working as a banker using business methods to empower women, to lift people out of poverty, and to help make the world a better place. So my special background of combining an interest in social problems with an expertise in editing business books has made me sort of the go-to guy in the publishing industry for books that are in that sweet spot where those two things are combined. So it's ended up being a career that has been tremendously rewarding for me personally, very enjoyable. And it means that every day when I sit down at my desk to work on a project, chances are it's a project that is going to bring some positive good to the world. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be able to wake up every day and devote myself to projects of that kind.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make another mindfulness plug here. And you're talking about a practical application of something that's meaningful and that you personally are passionate about. And in mindfulness, we talk about the 2 wings of the bird. So it's like practicing your life in a way that you are practicing compassion and wisdom, kindness and awareness. So you're a living example of practicing those things. And there's another thing that's called right livelihood, right?
Mhm.
So it's how do we decide to live our lives and contribute to society, and are you doing it in service of the greater good? So it sounds like
Mhm.
you're an example of that as well. um, Now, you talked a little bit about when you work with other authors and you're co-authoring books. One
Mhm.
of the things that you try to and do is connect with their authenticity and
Mhm.
how they communicate that authenticity to the world. So if you were to leave the viewers one key message about understanding who they really are and how to communicate that to the world, what would it be?
Well, that's such a great question. It's a question that I really help the authors that I work with to grapple with. Like many people, I bet many of the people watching this video, in the back of their mind have a dream. Oh, one of these days I'm going to write a book. People think about I'm going to write a family memoir or a book about the things I've learned over time, and it's actually a wonderful experience. One of the main things that people get out of writing a book is that they come to understand and know themselves better. They look back on their lives or the things that they've learned, their career, and they look for the arc of where did it begin, where did it end, what did I learn along the way, why did my life journey take the shape that it did. To write a really interesting and compelling book that people will want to read requires that you actually think deeply about the things that you've experienced in your life. Many people don't do that. Many people are not terribly reflective. And sometimes when someone comes to me uh, for help with the book, and I realize that they haven't really thought deeply about their journey, I encourage them to go and spend some time doing that, maybe doing some journaling, certainly meditation, and just talking with people about what they've experienced and what it has come to mean to them. All of these can be ways of getting started on the process of understanding more deeply who you are. And if you are going to write a book and then share it with the world, it's not going to be very compelling or very readable or very interesting unless you expose your vulnerability, talk about your failures as well as your successes, the mistakes you've made along the way, as well as the wisdom that you gained, the troubles and the struggles that you've lived through, the pains that you've suffered. Being willing to open yourself up in all those ways is certainly an important part of coming to know yourself and your place in the world. And it's also essential if you're going to write a book. So I guess one piece of advice that I would offer to people, if you want to enter into a deeper relationship with the world and with yourself and with the people around you, that actually writing a book would not be a bad way to start, because if you take it seriously as an endeavor, it will lead you on a real journey of self-discovery that I think you'll get a lot out of. So even if your book does not become a New York Times bestseller, or even if you never get it published at all, just creating the book will be a real mindfulness experience that I think you'll benefit from. So that's another way in which I feel very lucky that I've been able to spend a lifetime being a kind of midwife to other people as they take this kind of journey, learn more about themselves, and then share what they've learned with the world. So uh, it ends up bringing rewards to everybody concerned.
Great. Thank you. I like it. I like it. All right, Karl, how can people connect with you, learn about your work, reach you?
Thank you for asking. There's a couple of places that they can visit. One would be to visit the website for my publishing company, which is rivertownsbooks.com. And a good way to reach me through that would be by emailing me at Karl, Karl, at rivertownsbooks.com. And those would be good ways to get to know a little bit more about me, or to get in touch with me if there's anything you'd like to share.
Yes, and so you also help authors. You co-author, but you also help with editing and publishing as well, right?
That's
So
right. Yeah, I have created a little publishing company, and I only work with authors whose message I appreciate and endorse and believe in, and and books that I think will contribute something viable to the world. So if someone viewing this video thinks that they might have a book idea that would fall into that category, I'd be happy to talk about it with them.
Great. Thank you so much, Karl. Appreciate your time and wisdom.
My pleasure, Heather, and that's nice to speak with you.